The summer of 1996 was supposed to be a time of triumph. Atlanta, Georgia, pulsed with the electric energy of the Centennial Olympic Games, a global celebration of human achievement and unity. The city had transformed into a dazzling stage, its streets alive with the chatter of international visitors, the gleam of corporate sponsorships, and the relentless hum of a security apparatus tasked with protecting millions. Centennial Olympic Park, the beating heart of the Games, was a sprawling town square where thousands gathered to revel in concerts, swap pins from distant nations, and bask in the glow of an event meant to symbolize peace. But beneath this vibrant facade, a shadow moved. A shadow named Eric Rudolph, a man whose heart burned with a hatred so fierce it would tear through the celebration like a blade through flesh. Eric Rudolph was no ordinary drifter. Born on September 19, 1966, in Merritt Island, Florida, he was a man shaped by loss, isolation, and a festering resentment toward the world. After his father's death in 1981, Rudolph, then just a teenager, moved with his mother and siblings to the rugged, isolated mountains of Nantahala, Macon County, North Carolina. There, in the shadow of the Appalachians, he drifted further from society's edges, dropping out of school after ninth grade and carving out a solitary existence as a carpenter. But it wasn't just the wilderness that shaped him. It was the toxic ideology he absorbed, a venomous blend of anti-government fervor, anti-abortion zeal, and a warped interpretation of faith. Rudolph saw himself as a soldier in a war against what he called the ideals of global socialism and abortion on demand, beliefs he claimed were sanctioned by a corrupt United States government. His mind was a crucible of rage, forged by influences like the Christian identity movement, a militant, racist ideology that declared Northern European whites as God's chosen people. Though Rudolph later denied that his actions were driven by religion or race, his words and deeds painted a different picture, one of a man consumed by a mission to punish a world he saw as morally bankrupt. To understand Rudolph's motives is to peer into a mind that viewed the Olympic Games not as a celebration, but as a grotesque monument to everything he despised. In his own chilling words, the Olympics were a platform for global socialism, epitomized by John Lennon's Imagine, the theme of the 1996 Games, a song that, to Rudolph, symbolized a godless, homogenized world order. The event's grandeur, bankrolled by billions from multinational corporations and guarded by what he called an army of security from Washington, was an affront to his deeply held convictions. He believed the U.S. government's sanctioning of abortion was an abomination, a sin that demanded retribution. The Olympics, with its global spotlight, offered the perfect stage for his wrath. His plan was sinister in its simplicity: to detonate chaos in the heart of Atlanta, to confound, anger, and embarrass the government, and, if possible, to force the cancellation of the games themselves. The thought of empty streets, abandoned venues, and squandered investments fueled his twisted sense of justice. Each step he took toward Centennial Olympic Park was a step toward unleashing terror, a calculated act to rip apart the illusion of safety and expose the fragility of a nation he believed had lost its way. The setting of the 1996 Atlanta Olympics was both a triumph and a target. Centennial Olympic Park was designed as the epicenter of the Games, a place where the world could converge in harmony. On any given night, thousands milled about, families laughing, tourists snapping photos, and athletes mingling with spectators. The air was thick with the sounds of live music, the scent of street food, and the buzz of a city reveling in its moment on the world stage. Yet, this very openness made it vulnerable. The park was a kaleidoscope of humanity, but it was also a soft target, a place where a single act of violence could ripple outward, shattering lives and sowing fear. Security was unprecedented. 30,000 police and guards, the largest peacetime security force in U.S. history, patrolled the city. But no amount of vigilance could fully guard against a man like Rudolph, who moved with the precision of a predator, his intentions cloaked in the anonymity of the crowd. Rudolph's hatred wasn't abstract. It was personal, visceral, and meticulously planned. At 29 years old, he was a former U.S. Army explosives expert, trained in the art of destruction. His time in the military had honed his skills, but it was his years in the Appalachian wilderness that made him a ghost. He knew how to disappear, how to survive, how to strike and vanish. His ideology was a warped tapestry of anti-abortion extremism, anti-government paranoia, and a rejection of modernity itself. He saw himself as a righteous avenger, a lone warrior against a system he believed was complicit in moral decay. His statement, released years later, would reveal the chilling clarity of his intent. The attack on July 27, 1996, was meant to disrupt the games, to drain the coffers of those who profited from them, and to send a message to the world that America's values were a lie. The thought of his bomb, hidden in a green backpack, packed with 3 pipe bombs and masonry nails designed to tear through flesh, sitting unnoticed in the heart of the park is enough to send a shiver down the spine. It was a weapon of chaos, a ticking nightmare waiting to erupt. As the Olympic festivities reached their peak, Rudolph walked among the revelers, indistinguishable in his jeans and blue short-sleeved shirt, the heavy backpack slung over his shoulder. To the untrained eye, he was just another face in the crowd, a nobody in a sea of thousands. But inside, he carried a darkness that no security scanner could detect. His heart beat not with the excitement of the games, but with the cold certainty of his mission. The world was watching Atlanta, but Rudolph was watching the world, waiting for the moment to unleash his fury. The park, with its bright lights and joyous noise, was a stage for celebration, but it was also a trap, set by a man who saw destruction as salvation. The contrast between the Olympic spirit and Rudolph's motives is what makes this story so chilling. The games were meant to unite, to inspire, to showcase the best of humanity. Yet, in the shadows, a man moved with a purpose that was the antithesis of everything the Olympics stood for. His hatred was a silent scream, a force that could not be reasoned with or contained. As the clock ticked toward midnight on July 27, 1996, the stage was set for a tragedy that would shake the nation to its core. The question wasn't whether Rudolph would act. It was how many lives would be shattered when he did. This was the beginning of a nightmare, one that would unfold in the heart of Atlanta, under the watchful eyes of the world. The man who called himself a warrior for his cause was about to ignite a chain of events that would leave scars on a city, a nation, and the lives of those caught in his path. The Centennial Olympic Park bombing was not just an attack on a place. It was an assault on hope, a calculated act to sow fear and division. And at its center was Eric Rudolph, a phantom fueled by rage, ready to light the fuse that would change everything. The night of July 27, 1996, was alive with the pulse of Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park. The air was thick with the sultry heat of a Georgia summer, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel heavy with possibility. Thousands of revelers packed the park, their laughter mingling with the thrum of a rock concert, the clink of beer bottles, and the electric buzz of a city at the peak of its Olympic glory. The park was a kaleidoscope of color, neon lights flashing, flags from every corner of the globe fluttering in a breeze, and the seductive glow of a moment when the world seemed to hold its breath in celebration. Couples swayed to the music, their bodies close, sweat glistening under the stage lights. Children darted through the crowd, their giggles piercing the night. It was a scene of pure, unbridled joy, a fleeting illusion of safety that was about to be shattered. In the heart of this vibrant chaos, a green Alice backpack sat innocently near the base of a sound and light tower, just steps from the main stage, where Jack Mack and the Heart Attack belted out their final encore. To the untrained eye, it was just another piece of forgotten luggage, a common sight in a park teeming with distracted tourists. But inside that unassuming bag was a monster, a homemade pipe bomb, the largest of its kind ever seen in FBI records, packed with 3 steel pipes, each stuffed with smokeless powder and primed with a Westclock's alarm clock. The device was a grotesque masterpiece, laced with 4 pounds of masonry nails, designed to rip through flesh like a storm of razors. Its creator, Eric Rudolph, had slipped away into the shadows, his pulse racing not with fear, but with the cold thrill of anticipation. He was miles away now, a ghost in the night, but his presence lingered in that deadly package, ticking down to chaos. At 12:58 a.m., a phone call crackled through to a 911 operator from payphone at a Days Inn on Peachtree Street. The voice on the line was calm, deliberate, and chillingly precise. "There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes. The operator's heart skipped a beat, But before she could ask more, the line went dead. The warning was cryptic, taunting, and maddeningly vague. Was it a prank? A hoax? The police had no time to debate. The park was a sea of humanity, 40,000 souls dancing, laughing, oblivious to the nightmare about to unfold. Officers scrambled, their radios crackling with urgency, as the clock ticked closer to catastrophe. It was Richard Jewell, a 33-year-old security guard with a stocky build and an earnest demeanor, who first spotted the suspicious backpack. Jewell was no hero in the eyes of the world, not yet. He was just a man doing his job, his eyes scanning the crowd with the quiet vigilance of someone who took pride in protecting others. His flashlight caught the glint of the green nylon bag, abandoned beneath the tower, and a chill ran down his spine. Something was wrong. He flagged down Tom Davis, a nearby agent from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and together they peered at the bag, its weight and bulk screaming danger. "This doesn't look right," Jewell muttered, his voice tight with unease. They called in the bomb squad, and the air grew thick with tension as technicians approached, their movements slow, deliberate, like dancers in a deadly ballet. The crowd was still buzzing, the music fading but the energy electric, when the first officers began to push people back. "Clear the area," they shouted, their voices sharp against the night's hum. Some obeyed, stepping away reluctantly, their eyes curious, almost amused. Others lingered, drawn by the magnetic pull of something unfolding, something big. The bomb squad's lead technician knelt beside the bag, his gloved hands trembling ever so slightly as he examined the device. It was no hoax. The pipes, the wires, the sheer malevolence of the construction told him everything he needed to know. This was real, and time was running out. At 1:20 a.m., the world exploded. The bomb detonated with a deafening roar, a blinding flash of light that tore through the night like a scream. The ground shook, and a wave of heat and shrapnel blasted outward, transforming the festive park into a battlefield. Nails flew like bullets, slicing through skin, muscle, and bone. Screams erupted, raw and primal, as bodies hit the ground. Blood pooled on the pavement, glistening under the park's lights. A 44-year-old mother, Alice Hawthorne, was struck in the head by a nail, her life snuffed out in an instant as she fell, her body crumpling beside her stunned daughter. A Turkish cameraman, Melih Uzunal, collapsed, his heart pierced by shrapnel as he ran toward the blast, his journalist's instinct pulling him toward the story that would claim his life. Over 100 others were wounded, their bodies lacerated by nails, their faces frozen in shock and pain. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke, the coppery tang of blood, and the suffocating weight of fear. Centennial Olympic Park, once a beacon of joy, was now a scene of carnage. The stage was silent, the music replaced by the wail of sirens and the desperate cries of the injured. Medics rushed in, their hands slick with blood as they triaged the wounded. Parents clutched their children, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. The crowd scattered, some running blindly, others frozen, unable to process the horror unfolding around them. The park's lights, once festive, now cast an eerie glow over the chaos, illuminating the twisted metal of the sound tower, the scattered debris, and the shattered dreams of a city that had dared to shine. The Olympic Games, meant to be a symbol of unity, were thrown into disarray. The International Olympic Committee, led by President Juan Antonio Samaranch, faced an impossible choice: continue the Games or bow to the terror. Athletes, still reeling from the news, huddled in their dorms, their gold medal dreams tainted by fear. Spectators, who had come to Atlanta for a celebration, now whispered of leaving, their suitcases half-packed, their eyes scanning every corner for danger. The park was cordoned off, its once welcoming paths now a crime scene crawling with FBI agents, their faces grim as they sifted through the wreckage for clues. The world's media descended, their cameras capturing every grim detail, the bloodstains, the mangled metal, the haunted faces of survivors. Headlines screamed of terror, of a city under siege, of a dream turned nightmare. Yet, even as fear gripped Atlanta, a fierce resolve took hold. Samaranch, his voice heavy with grief, declared that the Games would go on. "We will not let this act of violence stop us," he said, his words broadcast to a world watching in stunned silence. The decision was bold, defiant, but it came at a cost. Attendance plummeted as fear kept spectators away. Venues that had buzzed with excitement now felt hollow, their seats empty, their energy drained. The economic ripple was staggering. Millions in lost revenue for a city that had poured billions into hosting the games. Corporate sponsors, who had bankrolled the event with dreams of global exposure, now faced a tarnished image, their logos juxtaposed against images of bloodshed. The park, meant to be the heart of the Olympics, remained closed for days, its reopening a somber affair marked by candlelight vigils and a heavy police presence. In the shadows, Eric Rudolph watched from afar, his heart cold, his mission accomplished. The chaos, the fear, the disruption, it was exactly what he had wanted. His bomb had done more than kill and maim. It had fractured the illusion of safety, exposed the vulnerability of a nation, and sent a message that echoed far beyond Atlanta. He had slipped away, a phantom in the night, leaving behind a city scarred and a nation shaken. But the story was far from over. The hunt for the bomber was just beginning, and the path to justice would be long, twisted, and fraught with missteps. The bombing was a climax of terror, a moment when the world held its breath, waiting for the next blow. But it was also a turning point, a spark that ignited a fierce determination to fight back. Atlanta would not bow. The games would continue. And somewhere in the darkness, a man who thought he could vanish would soon learn that no one escapes forever. The morning after the Centennial Olympic Park bombing, Atlanta awoke to a city transformed. The air, once thick with the sultry heat of celebration, now carried the acrid tang of fear and suspicion. The streets still littered with the ghosts of the previous night's chaos, shattered glass, abandoned belongings, and bloodstains hastily scrubbed from the pavement, hummed with a new kind of energy, the relentless pursuit of a killer. The FBI, the ATF, and every law enforcement agency in Georgia were on high alert, their radios crackling with urgency, their eyes scanning every face in the crowd. The world was watching, demanding answers, and the pressure was a living thing, coiling tighter with each passing hour. Somewhere out there was a bomber, a phantom who had struck at the heart of the Olympics and vanished into the night. But the hunt for this shadow would take a dark, twisted turn, ensnaring an innocent man in a nightmare of suspicion while the real predator slipped through the cracks, taunting the world with his invisibility. In the eye of this storm was Richard Jewell, the unassuming security guard who had first spotted the deadly backpack beneath the sound tower. At 33, Jewell was a man of quiet ambition, his stocky frame and earnest demeanor masking a deep desire to protect and serve. He wasn't a cop, not in the official sense, but he carried himself with the pride of one, his flashlight and radio his tools of vigilance. On that fateful night of July 27th, 1996, it was Jewell who had sounded the alarm, his gut screaming that the abandoned Alice backpack was no innocent oversight. His quick thinking had saved countless lives, pushing back the crowd just moments before the bomb erupted in a storm of nails and fire. In the immediate aftermath, he was hailed as a hero, his name whispered with gratitude by those who knew how close they'd come to death. But in the pressure cooker of a federal investigation, heroes could become villains in the blink of an eye, and Jewell was about to learn just how cruel fate could be. The FBI needed a suspect, and they needed one fast. The bombing had shaken the nation, tarnished the Olympics, and left the world demanding justice. With little to go on, no clear fingerprints, no witnesses to the bomber's face, just a cryptic 911 call and a pile of twisted metal. The investigation latched onto the man closest to the scene. Jewell fit a profile, one the FBI leaned into with reckless certainty. The hero complex, a lone, overzealous security guard who might plant a bomb to play the savior. It was a theory born of desperation, not evidence, but it spread like wildfire. On July 30th, just 3 days after the blast, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution published a bombshell headline. FBI suspects hero guard may have planted bomb. The words hit like a second explosion, shattering Jewell's life in an instant. The media descended ravenous, their cameras flashing like predators' eyes in the dark. Reporters camped outside his mother's modest apartment in Atlanta, their questions sharp and accusing. "Did you do it, Richard? Why were you there? they demanded, their voices dripping with suspicion. Overnight, the man who had saved lives became the face of terror, his every move dissected, his past twisted into a narrative of guilt. Jules' world collapsed under the weight of scrutiny. The FBI searched his home, tearing through his mother Bobby's belongings, confiscating everything from his hunting rifles to her Tupperware, as if a plastic container could hold the secrets of a bomber. Agents tailed him, their unmarked cars a constant shadow, their eyes boring into him at every turn. The media painted him as a bumbling wannabe, a loner who craved attention, a man who lived with his mother and whose only crime, it seemed, was being too ordinary. Talk shows buzzed with speculation. Comedians mocked his weight, his accent, his very existence. Yet Jules, with his soft southern drawl and unshakable calm, refused to break. "I didn't do this," he told his lawyer, Watson Bryant, his voice steady but his eyes haunted. "I was trying to save people." The injustice was suffocating, a slow-motion crucifixion played out on the national stage. The public, hungry for a villain, devoured the narrative, oblivious to the truth, slinking away in the shadows. While Jules endured this torment, the real bomber, Eric Rudolph, was a ghost in the wilderness. At 29, Rudolph was no ordinary fugitive. Trained in explosives during his brief stint in the U.S. Army, he was a master of survival, honed by years in the rugged Appalachian Mountains. The dense forests of western North Carolina, with their labyrinthine trails and hidden caves, were his sanctuary, a place where he could vanish like smoke. He moved with the stealth of a predator, his lean frame blending into the trees, his mind sharp with the paranoia of a man who knew he was hunted. Rudolph had planned his escape as meticulously as his attack. After planting the bomb in Centennial Park, he had melted into the crowd, his jeans and blue shirt rendering him invisible among the thousands. By the time the bomb detonated, he was gone, slipping out of Atlanta under the cover of chaos, leaving behind a city in flames and a trail that went cold before it even began. Rudolph's evasion was a masterclass in cunning. He didn't just run, he disappeared. He knew the FBI would comb the city, so he fled to the one place they couldn't easily follow, the wilds of Nantahala National Forest. There, in the shadow of the Smoky Mountains, he lived like a specter, surviving on stolen food, cash supplies, and his intimate knowledge of the terrain. He avoided roads, towns, even the faintest trace of civilization. His footprints were whispers in the dirt, erased by wind and rain. Locals in Murphy, North Carolina, would later whisper of sightings, a fleeting figure in the woods, a shadow moving at dusk, but no one could pin him down. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in history, with hundreds of agents scouring the southeast, helicopters buzzing overhead, and dogs sniffing trails that led nowhere. Wanted posters bearing Rudolph's name and grainy photo blanketed the region, offering a $1 million reward. Yet he remained a phantom, his silence a taunt to the authorities who chased a ghost, while an innocent man burned. The tension was electric, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse played out across a nation on edge. Every lead, every tip, sent pulses racing through FBI headquarters. Was that him in Alabama, spotted at a gas station, or in Tennessee, glimpsed in a diner? The public was ravenous for closure, their curiosity a fever that fueled endless speculation. Was the bomber a lone wolf, a terrorist cell, or something worse? The media churned out theories, each more lurid than the last, while Jules' name remained synonymous with guilt. The climax of this drama came in October 1996, when the FBI, under mounting pressure, finally cleared Jules. A letter from the Justice Department, cold and bureaucratic, admitted what he had known all along. He was not a suspect. The media, once so quick to condemn, offered half-hearted apologies, but the damage was done. Jules' reputation was in tatters, his life scarred by a nation's rush to judgment. Yet, even as he stepped out of the spotlight, battered but unbroken, the real hunt was heating up. The resolution of this chapter came not with Rudolph's capture, that was still years away, but with a shift in focus. By early 1997, the FBI had begun to piece together a broader pattern. The Olympic bombing wasn't an isolated act. Similar attacks, a women's clinic in Sandy Springs, Georgia, in January 1997, a gay nightclub in Atlanta the following month, and a Birmingham, Alabama, abortion clinic in 1998, bore the same chilling signature: pipe bombs, nails, and a hatred that burned cold. The 911 call from the Olympic bombing, traced to a payphone, matched the pattern of warnings in these later attacks. The name Eric Robert Rudolph emerged, whispered at first, then shouted, as the FBI connected the dots. He wasn't just a suspect, he was a serial bomber, a man whose ideology drove him to strike again and again, each explosion a scream against a world he despised. The pursuit of Rudolph became a saga of frustration and fascination. He was a shadow, always one step ahead, his survival skills outwitting the best trackers in the country. The public was hooked, their fear mingling with a perverse admiration for a man who could vanish so completely. The forests of North Carolina became a mythic battleground, a place where technology and manpower met their match in one man's cunning. For Jewel, the clearing of his name was a bitter victory, a moment of justice overshadowed by the knowledge that the real killer was still out there, laughing in the dark. The hunt would continue, a slow burn that kept the nation on edge, waiting for the day when the phantom would finally fall. The spring of 2003 was a restless season in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. For nearly 5 years, Eric Robert Rudolph had been a ghost, a shadow slipping through the dense forests of Nantahala, outwitting the largest manhunt in FBI history. The nation had been gripped by his legend, a bomber who struck at the heart of the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, then vanished into the wild, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. The air in Murphy, North Carolina, was heavy with the scent of pine and the weight of secrets, as locals whispered of sightings. A fleeting figure in the twilight, a rustle in the underbrush, a man who seemed to belong to the wilderness itself. The $1 million bounty on his head had turned every hiker, every hunter, into a would-be detective, their eyes scanning the trees for a glimpse of the fugitive who had become a dark myth. But on May 31, 2003, the chase was about to end, not with a blaze of gunfire, but with a quiet, almost surreal moment that would send shivers down the spine of a nation. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleepy town of Murphy stirred under a veil of mist. Jeff Postel, a 21-year-old rookie cop barely a month into his job, was patrolling the empty streets behind a Bilo supermarket, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was cool, laced with the faint musk of damp earth and garbage bins. His radio crackled softly, a mundane rhythm to a night that felt like any other. Then, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a man, lean and disheveled, rummaging through a dumpster, his hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. Postel's pulse quickened, his instincts tingling with the thrill of something out of place. The man wore a blue jacket, jeans, and a cap pulled low, his face partially obscured but his movements deliberate, almost predatory. "Hey, what are you doing?" Postel called, his voice sharp, cutting through the silence. The man froze, his eyes locking onto the young officers, and for a moment, the world held its breath. Postel didn't know it yet, but he was staring into the face of Eric Rudolph, the most wanted man in America. The tension was electric, a heartbeat away from chaos. Rudolph could have run. He'd done it before, melting into the forest like a wraith. He could have fought, his survivalist instincts honed by years of evading capture. But instead, he raised his hand slowly, his lips curling into a faint, unsettling smile, as if he'd been expecting this moment all along. "I'm just looking for food," he said, his voice calm, almost disarmingly soft. Postel, unaware of the magnitude of his discovery, cuffed him and called for backup, his heart pounding with the thrill of a routine stop turned extraordinary. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the myth of the untouchable fugitive began to crumble. The man who had terrorized a nation, who had haunted the dreams of those who lost loved ones in Centennial Olympic Park, was now just a figure in a patrol car, his eyes glinting with a strange mix of defiance and resignation. Word spread like wildfire. By sunrise, Murphy was buzzing. The quiet mountain town transformed into a circus of flashing lights, news vans, and federal agents descending like hawks. The FBI confirmed it. The man in custody was Eric Robert Rudolph, his identity verified by fingerprints and a face that matched the grainy wanted posters plastered across the southeast. The nation exhaled, a collective release of tension that had built over years of fruitless searches. But the excitement was tinged with a chilling curiosity. How had he survived so long? What drove him to keep running, to strike again and again? And what would he say now, caught at last in the glare of justice? Rudolph's capture was a climax years in the making, but it was his confession that sent shivers down the spine. In April 2005, as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, Rudolph stood in a federal courtroom in Atlanta, his lean frame clad in an orange jumpsuit, his eyes cold and unreadable. The room was packed, prosecutors, survivors, families of the victims, their collective gaze boring into the man who had torn their lives apart. The air was thick with anticipation, a sensuous tension that pulsed with every word he spoke. Rudolph pleaded guilty to 4 bombings: the Centennial Olympic Park attack that killed Alice Hawthorne and injured over 100, the 1997 double bombing at a Sandy Springs abortion clinic, the 1997 attack on an Atlanta gay nightclub, and the 1998 Birmingham clinic bombing that killed a security guard, Robert Sanderson, and maimed a nurse, Emily Lyons. His confession was no act of remorse. It was a chilling manifesto, delivered with the precision of a man who believed his actions were righteous. "I am responsible for these bombings," he said, his voice steady, almost hypnotic, as he detailed his motives with a clarity that was both mesmerizing and horrifying. He spoke of his hatred for the U.S. government, for its sanctioning of abortion, for its embrace of a globalized world he despised. The Olympic bombing, he admitted, was meant to confound, anger, and embarrass Washington, to disrupt the games and expose the fragility of a nation he saw as morally corrupt. He described planting the bomb in the park, watching from a distance as the crowd milled about, oblivious to the ticking nightmare in their midst. He revealed how he made the 911 call from a payphone, his voice disguised, his heart racing with the thrill of chaos about to unfold. The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words hanging like a storm cloud, each syllable a reminder of the lives shattered by his hand. Survivors wept, their scars, both visible and invisible, aching anew, while others stared, transfixed, unable to look away from the man who had turned their world upside down. The resolution came swiftly, but it was not without its shadows. On August 22, 2005, Rudolph was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without parole, a punishment that locked him away in the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, a fortress of concrete and steel where the nation's worst were buried alive. The judge's gavel fell like a thunderclap, sealing his fate, but the victory was bittersweet. For Alice Hawthorne's daughter, Fallon, who had watched her mother die in the park, no sentence could bring back what was lost. For Emily Lyons, whose body bore the scars of the Birmingham blast, justice was a cold comfort against a lifetime of pain. The nation celebrated the end of a manhunt, but the wounds of Atlanta lingered, a reminder that some scars never heal. Yet, even as the courtroom doors closed, the story felt unfinished. Rudolph's confession, chilling as it was, left questions dangling like threads in the wind. How had he survived so long in the wilderness? Were there others who helped him? Silent accomplices still hidden in the shadows? His life in the mountains, his ability to evade capture for 5 years, had turned him into a dark legend, a figure who inspired both fear and a twisted fascination. Rumors swirled of caches of supplies, of sympathizers in the hills, of a man who might still have secrets to spill. The FBI had their man, but the myth of Eric Rudolph lingered, a specter that refused to fade. And what of the future? Locked away in his cell, did Rudolph still burn with the same hatred that drove him to kill? Would his story inspire others, twisted minds drawn to his cause? The nation had closed one chapter, but the book felt far from finished. The forests of Nantahala still whispered his name, and the scars of Centennial Olympic Park still pulsed with memory. For those who lived through the terror, the question wasn't just about justice. It was about what might come next. The story of Eric Rudolph, the Atlanta Olympic bomber, is far from over, and the next chapter waits, shrouded in mystery, ready to unfold. Want to know what secrets still lie hidden in the shadows of this chilling saga? Stay tuned to my channel for the next installment, where we'll dive deeper into the enigma of Eric Rudolph and the echoes of his crimes that still haunt us today.